You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christy and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Dodge Movie Podcast. Happy New Year, everybody. We are kicking off a new year, and so the first thing we need to do is wrap up a little business from last year. We had a contest that all of you probably have heard ad nauseum. You won't hear about it again after this episode.
Well, yeah, there's one little thing here, but yeah, that's over and done. The people have spoken, and they said, we're not really into this contest.
By spoken, you meant they were silent.
That is a kind of speaking, I suppose.
Yes,
but
they voted with
I think they communicated effectively that they weren't really into the idea.
They weren't. But, you try things, and then we move on.
Right? Nothing wrong with trying. Every adult when I was a kid told me that, and I ignored them like all kids do. But, just go ahead and try. What's the worst that could happen? Nothing.
Right. So we tried it. So we were going to announce that the winner of the $100 Amazon gift card went to Superfan Lee. So congratulations, Lee. I think I know what he spent it on, but I don't know specifically. He told me what he was maybe looking at.
It was not Dodge Movie Podcast merch because we give that stuff away for free a lot of the time.
Right. So speaking of that, we mentioned in, I believe it was the last episode, but if not, it was the episode before that. You had wondered how many podcasts make it to 150
I did, yeah.
downloads or episodes. And so I looked it up and you were correct. I was mistaken. I figured a lot of people would have made 150 at the very least. That is not the case. It was like 10. I put it in the show notes of the last episode. It was 10% make it past 100 episodes.
Right. Yeah.
So you're right. It is an achievement that we've almost been doing this 3 years. And we have 150 episodes under about 151 after today.
So I think I can safely say that we are in the podcast upper class.
Yeah, let's say that. So it got me wondering where are our listeners coming from? And we do have some fans in Germany. We have a couple fans in Australia. Hi, Udo. And a smattering around, some in the UK. We have a handful in Canada.
Hey.
So most of our audience comes from the United States. And so I was just kind of curious as I was poking around the little stats. It's kind of fun. Where are the different states that make up the United States of America and where are our fans? So not surprising, the most of our downloads come from the state of Oregon where we live. So that's all my friends.
Right.
Our friends.
Yeah, well, I don't have any friends, so that's fair.
No, our friends. And because my mom doesn't listen anymore. So we lost family. So it's really just our friends.
Sorry for that, but yeah. No one related really cares.
Right. So the next most popular place is it says United States Other. And I think that's Alaska and Hawaii.
Could it be our Guamanians?
It could. Very much. Our
Puerto
Virgin
Ricans?
Yes.
Right.
So we appreciate them.
Absolutely.
And then followed by that Washington, which makes sense because it's a neighboring state.
Right. I know some folks who live just across the river.
Right. So they must listen. So thanks to all you Washingtonians. Texas is our next biggest.
Oh, yeah. Everything's bigger in Texas, including our audience.
Yes.
So Superfan is responsible for some of that, I think.
Yes. Would that be Superfan Ernie?
It would be.
Yeah. And then Florida's next. And you just found out who that could be, possibly.
Yeah, well, there's one listener there, but maybe he's been spreading the word.
Right. So then we do get, I'll be forthcoming, we do get single digits for the following states. California, Louisiana, Montana, Virginia, New York, Arizona, New Jersey, Illinois, Missouri, Michigan, Tennessee, Maryland, Georgia. I don't even know why Iowa's on here because it says 0.
So
I started to read it and I went, wait, why am
it's
I?
like a quarter of a listener, but they round it down.
Maybe that's it. So we would like to offer, it has been a while since we've asked for reviews. Our last review was received in 2022. And while we know that obviously people are listening from all over, it would really help our podcast to get out there to more people. If you could write a review and let's see, I see them, but I don't know who they go with. So if you write a review and then you, I guess, like do a screenshot or somehow show me that that's connected with you, I will send you a Smoochie sticker. Mm-hmm. So that's some of the merch that you were talking about.
I'm going to be honest. I don't know what sort of forensics we're going to do.
Right. No.
On this one. So, I mean, if you're willing to burn the calories to ask for a sticker, I think we'll probably
send
be okay.
you one. Yeah. They're sitting here on my desk. I would love to share them with people. So thank you for the people who have submitted reviews. We very much appreciate them. We've gotten some very positive reviews. I think we're running at 5 stars for our podcast. So thank you to all of you who made that happen. We appreciate it. And let's get into our first film of the year.
Our very first film.
Yes.
Drum roll, please.
Yes. So we picked it last week. It's The Rose, 1979.
79.
Yeah. So
Right.
I was 8 years old. How old were you?
I was 11.
Okay. Do you remember watching it?
Absolutely not.
No, not me either. I think my mom knew enough. Like 8 years old is not old enough to watch this movie. This movie was hard for us to get.
Yeah, this was fascinating to me at how difficult it was. We have a friend of ours who's a filmmaker who talks about Christopher Nolan's idea of buying things on physical media because you don't want to get screwed by the streaming companies if they decide not to show it anymore. And we found that out firsthand with this one. This is a film that people know about. It's considered part of the AFI list. It's noteworthy, and we couldn't stream it anywhere. We couldn't even buy it digitally.
Right. We've gotten really spoiled between Apple and Amazon, who has a pretty big catalog. And so we just thought, oh yeah, we'll be able to find it there. So we did it the old fashioned way. We rented this film from the library.
Yeah, I think they were happy just to see someone come in the doors.
I think there are a lot of people out there that use the library. So
I really hope so. But every time we go to that particular building, it's like us and the librarians.
She's like, come in.
yeah. Can
I make you a cup of tea?
She went and got it for you. You're like, no, I can walk 10 feet to get off the shelf. And she, no, I'll get it. Don't. Yeah, I think maybe if we'd asked for a cup of tea, they would have made us one.
So let's see. So 1979's The Rose is directed by Mark Rydell, who also did The Long Goodbye from 1973 and On Golden Pond from
That's why I know his name.
81.
I looked up his oeuvre the name sounded familiar, and I looked it up, and I'm scrolling down. I'm like, no, I didn't see it. Oh, On Golden Pond. Yeah. What's your trivia for On Golden Pond?
My dear sweet uncle, well into the late, so On Golden Pond it says it's 1981, well late into the 1980s, would proudly, and this is ironic given what we do, would proudly proclaim, I haven't been to a movie since On Golden Pond, like the movie theater.
Right, yeah.
Since On Golden Pond. It was the touchstone of his...
It's not quite like Chris Carolla telling her son that she doesn't have basic cable, even though he's on 3 channels.
Well, to be fair to him, I loved movies back then, but it wasn't my career. So it wasn't like he was stepping on my career, but it was ironic how proud he was. And it wasn't for any reason. Like he liked that movie.
Well, it's all downhill from there. He's like, I'm not going to spoil it.
Right, I'm going to go out on top.
Okay, nothing against On Golden Pond, but I don't know if that's the pinnacle of my filmmaking experience.
Oh my gosh, I would watch that one again. I love that movie. It's a movie about daddy issues. Need we go no further why I love it?
Right, I guess. We should probably rewatch it again. Certainly, I haven't seen it but the once back in the day.
I would happily watch it.
And the only thing only thing I remember from that film is Henry Fonda giving somebody the finger, which was so scandalous
back
at the
then.
time.
Yeah, totally. So the reason that Mark Rydell's name sounded familiar to me has nothing to do with poor Mr. Rydell. It's because it's the name of the high school from Greece.
Oh, Rydell High, you're totally right.
That's why. So
Is it spelled with a Y in Greece?
I think so.
Because there is, when I played football, there was a manufacturer which was Riddell.
No, I think it's with a Y, the high school.
Yeah, well, maybe they were big fans of his work.
Right? Who knows? Let's see. We're getting so distracted. This movie stars Bette Midler as Rose, Alan Bates as Rudge, Frederick Forrest as, well, it was interesting because in the credits it called him Dyer, or like his name is Dyer in the movie.
Right.
His name is Houston Dyer, but apparently everybody called him by his, except for Rose called him Houston.
Very confusing.
I don't remember very many people calling him Dyer now that I think about it.
It was mostly just the trivia on the IMDb
they always
page.
referred to him.
But in the credits, he is Dyer. That's
Yes.
the weird thing. I couldn't find him for a while.
Yes. A much younger and a very alive Harry Dean Stanton was in it.
Right.
A very young David Keith.
So here's the thing about Harry Dean Stanton. He gets pretty high billing, and he's in one scene.
Yeah. But he is kind of like a pivotal moment. Or at least a plot point. It's definitely a plot point.
I think what it was is he just had star power, and so they had to give him top billing.
Yeah, we'll talk. Well, and poor Doris Roberts, she doesn't even get a character's name other than Rose's mother. And she's in one scene at the very beginning.
Right. I mean, it's like one shot. They may have played parts of it again at the end of the film.
Oh, that's true.
But yeah, we can talk a little bit about that scene
so
too.
Let me power through these.
Power. Go.
The DP is Vilmos Zsigmond.
Sigmund, all right.
And he also did The Long Goodbye. So I bet you the director, kind of brought him along on this one's being 6 years after that film. He also did 77's Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah.
And he was known for his use of natural light and vivid use of color on features.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there is a lot of natural light in this film because much of it takes place at a concert or at night. But yeah, okay.
Yeah. We've got some filming locations in and around Los Angeles, the Will Turn Theater, Veterans Memorial Stadium in Long Beach. And then in New York City, the Plaza Hotel, the Luxor Baths, the NYPD of the 9th Precinct. So there's some New York and LA locations. And the writer of this film is Bill Kirby and Bo Goldman. And Bo did One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and The Flamingo Kid, as well as Dick Tracy. And he passed just this past July at the age of 90.
Oh, well.
Yeah. So, but thank you for your oeuvre, Bo Goldman.
Right. Quite a bit of range there.
The synopsis for this film is the tragic life of a self-destructive female rock star who struggles to deal with the consistent pressures of her career and the demands of her ruthless business manager. And the tagline is, she gave and gave and gave until she had nothing left to give. What do you think?
Yeah, doesn't. I don't think it describes the film or makes me want to go see it. So I think I can do a little better.
Right. So a little bit of trivia. It's somewhat controversial whether this, although I think it's readily recognized that they really wanted to make the movie of Janis Joplin's life, and it was titled Pearl, but Janis's family did not give them permission. And so they switched it to Rose.
Interestingly, one of the drag queens performs as Pearl Hart, a Janis Joplin impersonator. And I'm pretty sure that was the drag queen that was performing as the Rose, basically. Yeah.
The DVD sleeve has a trivia item that reads, Bette Midler's fictional role bears striking similarities to Janis Joplin, who many say was the film's inspiration. Like Joplin, Midler's character performs while drinking Southern Comfort. She is called Rose, as Joplin was called Pearl, and she returns home to flaunt her success just as Joplin showed up at her high school reunion.
Yeah, I think the similarities are pretty striking there. I would accept that as this film is a pastiche of Janis Joplin's life. Yeah.
One little bit of trivia is Bette Midler was actually up for some parts in Rocky and Nashville, which is
Apollo Creed?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think she was playing Apollo Creed.
Oh, okay.
But
I think that'd have been a fun film.
Robert Altman's film Nashville and then Foul Play. But she turned down all of those roles in order to play the lead in this one, which actually made her an instant screen icon as far as an actress.
I would like to say regarding casting, I don't think this film can work unless the lead is really good at a singer. Now, I think you can make movies about singers with somebody who's good but not like great. I don't think this film could survive without somebody of a Bette Midler level. I just don't think it works well if the concert footage when she's singing, if you're like, I mean, it has to be somebody really good.
Yep, I totally agree with you. Why don't you kick us off with your pickup line, and then I'm going to talk about the opening scene because it's pretty powerful.
Rose says, "I got something I want to sing to you." Tracks pretty well.
Yeah, it opens up with concert footage, and her voiceover, it's just a black screen, and she's really out of breath. It's like she's struggling because she probably just did like a big
number.
Yeah, and so she's just struggling, and she seems a bit down. I wonder if it's bookending the ending.
Yeah, I read it as basically a flash forward.
Right,
it's the end of the film,
and so it's that. But then people walk into a garage. It's Doris Roberts, and it's probably her father. I think maybe
there's
brother.
A guy credited as Doris's or the Rose's father.
Right,
So.
and so they all walk into this garage with these photos around. One of her is a little girl and some like newspaper clippings, and it looks very kind of almost creepy.
It looks like a serial killer. There's red yarn.
Yeah. And then we cut to the airport with the band and backup singers coming off the plane. Then she appears. She's the last one. She's clearly hungover or stoned. She, kind of moving forward, just talking about the costuming in the scene. She's wearing like this red, a lot of red on like a dress, and then a coat or something. And then she's got purple shoes on, and those colors are opposite, or no, they're adjacent. Kind of on
the color wheel.
Yeah. She stumbles down the stairs, she drops a bottle, it breaks, and a guy smiles and kind of helps her to the limo. And then we cut to concert footage. And it was interesting because she was wearing almost like a blush colored tank top, and it made her look topless.
Yeah. And there were several of the concert scenes, she wasn't wearing a whole lot up top. There was a bit of her womanly figure was kind of displayed, which I think probably for the 70s was an accurate depiction.
Yes. Barefoot,
Right. Yeah. And one of the things that you mentioned there with a later scene when they refer to her as a hippie is this line's a little bit different for us now, right? Because it's not the thing. We were surprised that there was so much anti-hippie hatred, but back then that was, in some sense, a political statement, right? A tribal affiliation, the way a person was dressing. So there's that factor as well.
Yeah, we'll bring that up later.
Oops, sorry, stepped on that.
No, it's okay. I wanted to get to your cinematography because you wanted to talk about that. And I very much the film, a large portion of the film feels like a concert movie.
Yeah, that was one of my biggest notes was, how did they film this thing? Because there were so many concerts. Now, the first couple of concerts, I feel like they filmed in the same venue at the same night. They just edited it a little differently.
I would agree.
But there were other parts, like the ones where like she performs at like Veterans Memorial Stadium and some different things where it is obvious that they have gone to a different location. But filming that, this was the era of literal film. and the lighting is low and not particularly set up for cinematography. You're using really long lenses because you can't be right up next to the stage with your film crew. How do you not get people in the shot, keeping that all in focus? Like, how do you expose for that and still have a decent depth of field? That was incredibly challenging, I think, to get that concert footage. And I don't think it looks as pretty as some things that are, oh, well, that's an award-winning kind of... Right, but that was amazing that they got all of that concert footage.
Yeah. But I almost feel like it lent to the grittiness of her life, of being a rock and roll band, of things weren't polished. Like we just mentioned, like she wasn't done up. Like if you go to a Beyonce concert or a Kelly Clarkson, they're like done up, like the outfits. It looked like she pulled something off the floor and threw it on, kind of. And like we said, didn't really do hair and makeup. Like it wasn't.
Right. I remember our really good friend, even though we haven't talked to her in a while, Annie Bell, talked about for an award ceremony, she spent hours and hours in the hotel suite before doing hair and makeup. Right. And so you would think, like you said, for like if Beyonce's going on stage, it's a couple hours of hair and makeup to look fantastic. And this was, like you said, they kind of just almost dragged her out of the limo, propped her up in front of the mic and said, sing.
Right. So the movie kind of kicks off pretty early, I would say, almost, I mean, you tell me if it's the inciting incident, but she's in talking to her manager and she's saying, I'm tired. I want to take a break. I'd love to take a year off. Like, because he's talking, I think, even about when this tour is finished, we're going to go back into the recording studio.
So I thought that was really great shot selection. Because, and so this is partly sets, but also partly cinematography. They're having this argument, and the window behind them shows you Central Park.
Yeah.
So as a viewer, I'm now thinking, you're at a penthouse overlooking Central Park, and you're whining, right? I mean, it sets up that kind of, like, that she's got all the things that people would think I'm going to work hard for, and she's like, but now I want to...
own a break.
I would like to enjoy.
Yeah.
Right.
And she even says that. I've worked really hard. I want to enjoy my life.
Right.
I'll come back. I'll do a record, but I need a year off.
Right. And so I'm thinking if I was in that room, I'd be staring out, looking at Central Park for a while. But to her, it's kind of, this is like, she can't even enjoy the view. Mm-hmm. Right. She's just looking away from Central Park to argue with her dopey manager type, which I think is probably fairly accurate, but it just maybe credit to the actor, but I hated that character. I wanted her to push him out the window. Yeah,
I was torn. I wrote down in my notes, like, is he ruthless? Because I read the synopsis and I was like, is he ruthless or is he just a businessman who has been hired to further her career? And this is part of what they do. They do a tour, then they write an album, then they release the album, and then they do a tour. So in that scene, I felt like he was in a way just doing his job. Now, a later scene, he's definitely not a nice gentleman. But in that scene, I was like, but is he ruthless? Because she kind of does seem a little flaky. And so I almost had a tiny bit of compassion for him. Like, oh, it must be annoying to have to deal with these like coked out rock stars.
Yeah, maybe so, but he should work for her. So no, he was a jerk from the start. That was obvious to me, because if he was working for her and she says, I want to take a break, he's like, okay, then we'll take a break. I'll tell him we'll put the album out next year. I'll tell him you're writing songs and we'll be fine. So another thing is, ever since making a movie in an elevator, I'm very sensitive to these kind of things. And there's an extended scene of her in a phone booth. And how did they shoot that? There were no GoPros in 1979.
I very much felt like the audience was always outside the phone booth.
Yeah, I think they just took the windows out from the different sides.
So you know.
But like with the side with the doors, they have a hinge. Mm-hmm. It would be in the way. So they just they disassembled it a bit, right? Makes sense.
Right. I never thought we were... Well, there was a scene where they kind of did a close-up of that little shelf that was always in phone booths that she put the money and the drugs and
the stack of unidentified cards. Like they were too big for baseball cards, but that maybe would have made sense.
Cards?
Maybe? I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, and there was a bottle of booze on that little shelf.
Right. She had room for a lot of stuff.
She did. She had the big bag.
Okay, so this is unfortunately dating ourselves. Some of our listeners may not actually be acquainted with phone booths because they did disappear at a certain point. Like, of course, iPhones put them out of business pretty. But there used to be a little shelf in there, right? And you could array things, to write or something. It was like a cute little thing. And that's why, well, the British version for Doctor Who, but Bill and Ted, they use a phone booth. They were like little miniature rooms and they had like a little table. And so from cinematography, my last thing that I really wanted to talk about, which is I thought very interesting, is the interior shots when they're on the plane. The whole band is going. And if you notice, the camera moves gently. So imagine like if you were in a boat, right? So it's not shaky handheld. It was very deliberate, but there was a movement to it that very, very subtle, which to credit to the camera department, I'm pretty sure they did it on sticks and they just practiced and got this real slow kind of side to side or bobbing motion that gave a sense that they were in the plane, but it was super subtle. I'm guessing many people didn't notice it. But for those of us who are super sensitive to the shaky handheld, it was a very nice touch.
That's fascinating. I didn't even notice it.
Yeah.
So we had themes of drug use and drinking and defiance. She was being told not to use foul language. And then the first thing she does when she goes out on the stage is addresses the audience with one of like the most offensive of
7 words you can't say on television.
Yeah. There were lots of groupies hanging out with the band. So there was, those kind of things that we have come to associate with rock stars. I thought it was funny when she kind of connects with Houston. She goes on and on and on, and she's saying like the Rose, doesn't like to do this, and the Rose will do. And he goes, anyone who talks about themselves in the third person is Looney Tunes.
Yes.
He doesn't seem to be impressed by her fame or intimidated by it. He's just like, get over yourself. He's her driver. He is.
Yeah.
Well, I guess he's not her driver. He was somebody else's driver, and she jumped in and kind of absconded with their limo.
Yeah, she threw some cash at him, and he's like, okay, I'll give up on this job. Well, that's enough cash.
But then they end up
together.
So this is why I think that I think I'm going to make an argument for the Billy Ray scene, who is portrayed by Richard Dean Stanton. No,
Harry Dean Stanton. Richard Dean Anderson was MacGyver. So
I'm getting my 80s people mixed up. Is Billy Ray comes in and he disapproves of her singing his songs and her vulgarity. And he basically says, do not sing my songs anymore. So I feel like he's supposed to be kind of like in the day, like a George Jones,
right? Maybe
a Willie Nelson of the time, but maybe not. He's like.
So my question is,
who's the guy who Dolly Parton was? He had a show and she was on his show, and that's who she wrote "I Will Always Love You" for.
Got
Porter
nothing.
Wagner.
Oh, that's a country name from back in the day.
I think kind of that's who Harry Dean Stanton's supposed to be.
So I was curious. I don't know to what degree the person who wrote a song can say you can't record it. They could ask, but I think as long as you credit them, you can record any song you want. You have to pay them the songwriting fee, right?
Right.
And credit them. But other than that, I don't think you have a choice. But maybe as a musician, it's considered extremely poor form to go against somebody's direct orders. I don't know.
I think he was clearly supposed to be someone of a status, and for you to go ahead and record his song without his blessing probably would get you maybe not blacklisted, but kind of like people would look down on you because they're like, so I think it was, you would want their blessing.
Right, but she
back in the day
also had oppositional defiant disorder. So.
Yes, so that just made it worse. So it's interesting because she tells Houston about this story about when she was in high school, and it was a super sad story, especially, I guess, with modern eyes. She kind of brags, but I feel like it's a test. She says that basically she got with the whole football team. And it was kind of like, well, was it like a gang rape, or was it she was just expressing her sexuality, or
it landed to me as she made that up to test him. I don't think she really did it.
No, she did though, because remember at the end in the bar, that guy goes, I was there that night. Remember, right before she goes to the concert, she ends up at a bar, and she goes in, and one of the guys says, remember that night when you were on the football field? I was there. I was one of the guys.
Right. I'm just telling you how it landed to me.
Okay. So I think it happened, but I felt like what she was doing is she liked Houston, and she was like, I bet you're going to. So I'm going to tell you this story that is really, offensive and probably unattractive.
Yeah, it's a test. Yeah.
And so I'm going to see. And he kind of still hung out with her. He was like, all right, whatever. Like, he didn't really care, because she mentions it later. She says he liked me even though I told him about the football team. Mm-hmm. And so that definitely was her. I asked, is Rudge, her manager, frustrated by her behavior? He expresses his concern to Houston. At the after party, he is trying to get her to glad hand the supporters, and he fires her as a client and tells her that the concert's off. But that was a test for her as well. I wondered, are Houston and Rose really in love, or is she just looking for an escape route and a distraction to kind of leave the life?
Yeah, that's, I think, definitely part of it. I think the character of Houston is supposed to represent what she left behind. He's like a small town boy, right? He also, because he admits that he's AWOL from the army, and she wants to go AWOL from this thing that she was kind of drafted into. So to me, that's what his character is supposed to represent, right?
And then what is the vehicle for David Keith's character? He's the military kid that's in one of the bars, I think they go in.
Yeah, that character confused the heck out of me. I don't really know, like, not just like from a narrative standpoint, but just like in the story, what he was doing there, how he showed up, why he was there. I was very, very confused. And then he's wandering around in his Class A uniform the whole time, which is, again, kind of weird. I didn't quite understand that character so much.
So Mark Rydell would only agree to direct this film if Bette Midler was cast in the lead. And she had wholly been in bit parts and was primarily known as a nightclub singer. So this was huge for the director to kind of go to bat for her, because, and like we said, it kind of propelled her career to be in many other films. I mean, she went on to do like Big Business. What's the one about the friends that I love?
Beaches?
Yeah, Beaches.
Ruthless People?
Yeah, I mean, she was in a lot of films after this one. This one definitely kicked off her film career. Yeah.
She also had a television show, sitcom.
Acting choices, I felt like I could see almost some Bette Midler style bleeding through some of her performances. I don't think Bette drinks on stage. I think she's a little bit more controlled in her movement. I've actually seen her, and she's a little bit more controlled in her movements, but she's not, like, I feel like Janice is kind of like all over the place and very loosey-goosey kind of with her movements, but there was parts where she would talk to the audience, and it was like, oh, that feels more like that's a Bette thing than, a Rose thing. So just the historical context and the cultural significance of this film, I was shocked. They go into a diner and people are like angry. Like, most of the people are just kind of leave, get out. Like, have no problem being rude to her and Houston. And the chef even comes out and says, we don't serve hippies here. It's just like, oh my gosh. And I do remember some of my family members talking about hippies in a very derogatory way. Like, they were annoyed by them. They were dirty. They were, they didn't work.
As you describe them, it sounds like the homeless, right? And maybe they kind of were.
It's
right?
possible that people maybe viewed them in like...
Well, certainly in the 50s, into the 60s, I think being unemployed, being a bum, that was a very bad thing. It was considered a sign of a character defect, right? So that was part of it. There was drug use. It was counterculture. They were, going against the status quo. And I do think that still a generation of people that grew up in the shadow of World War II. So they were really anxious, right? Don't mess with the guy with the bad haircut and the weird mustache really almost tipped over the apple cart. So don't rock the boat. And I think that was why they really didn't like the hippies. They saw them as a threat. And then a lot of people in that movement were vocal proponents of communism, which was also a giant threat at the time. So, but yeah, you and I were both surprised at kind of the negative reaction, because for us growing up as kids, it was more like flower power. You'd see him, on television, like the Mystery Machine on Scooby-Doo. So we had a different perspective than that.
Yeah, I was just, it was so aggressive and outwardly. It wasn't even like...
hostile.
Yeah, very hostile. One patron says, "Get lost, bimbo." So they were just, and there were two young girls. I thought it was there were, oh no, it was a convenience store she went in, and the two young girls recognized her. So I would think someone of her stature, people would have kind of known, but they were just so annoyed at her appearance.
Yeah, that was one of the things, both in the store where she's like, when she went back home, she's like, "Don't you know who I am?" But also in the diner, she's a big name. I think somebody would recognize her. Not maybe everybody, but somebody would say, "Oh, look, it's the Rose."
Right. So speaking of kind of her appearance, now we can talk about one of the things that kind of caught your eye.
You mean the fact that she did not shave her armpits?
No. And it wasn't just a little bit. It wasn't just like a week or two.
Yeah, no, this was...
it's good months of growth.
Yeah, I was going to say, she committed for quite some time. I don't know the rate of armpit hair growth, but that looked to be at least a year to my eye.
Yeah.
And so I had the question that I looked up. I do occasionally do research. Very rarely, but I do. When did that become a thing? And the answer was between the wars. That Gillette apparently was, they tapped out the market on gentlemen's razors and decided they should convince women to shave their armpits and then their legs so they could sell more razors. And I am sorry to the ladies. Curse those Gillette people.
It's all a scam, ladies.
It really is. And then they charge you twice as much because they make it pink.
Right.
Are you kidding me?
Right. All right. So I loved like kind of some of her flowy gowns and tops. I liked all the concert venues backstage. It very much felt, she felt very at home at the drag club.
Right. I thought the band was probably realistically dressed for a late 70s band, but would someone find the bass player a shirt? Homie was topless the whole time.
It got hot up there.
Oh, now that I think about it, if he had a lady bass player who's topless, he would have sold millions of albums.
Right?
Yeah, can you explain to me why her loser manager, Rudge, was an English guy, but he dressed like Mac Davis?
It was 1979.
I guess that was it.
That's it. So when she performed When a Man Loves a Woman, and I have a greatest hits album of Bette's, and that song, I'm almost positive it's even that recording because of the cadence and different things. It just sounded so familiar. So I wondered, was that a thing that Bette brought with her? Like, did she sing that, or did she sing it after this? The soundtrack was performed by Bette, and The Rose was one of the biggest selling vinyl singles of 1980. The choreography was done by Tony Basil of Oh Mickey fame.
Tony Basil, of course.
This film is recognized by the American Film Institute as it's number 83. So was there any head trauma in this film?
Houston punches a guy in the diner. I wasn't exactly clear on all the places he punched him, but I think he punched him in the head once, at least. this is a different kind of head trauma, but Rose punches Houston in the nuts after he slaps her. And
Don't slap a lady.
I think he slapped her when he found her in the bathroom with Sarah.
Yes.
And then in the honky tonk bar, Houston punches a guy in the face. So he's a violent fellow.
Yeah, not cool. All right. There was some smooching before there was the punching.
Smoochie, smoochie, smoochie. Yeah, it was a mixed bag. So Rose and Houston smooch in the hotel room after their first boom chicka wow wow. Kiss again in the dressing room after a concert. And then Rose and the aforementioned Sarah kiss in the dressing room after the concert, which for 1979, two women kissing on screen was probably considered pretty racy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. Waka waka. All right, how about a driving review?
Well, there's a lot of vehicles in this film. So I'm actually going to start a little bit in the air. So they have a Viscount from Vickers, the 798D, which is their aircraft. These are fairly large aircraft, which should show that they're doing very well financially. However, there's a bit of a mystery here because at one point she takes a helicopter. I think it's when she goes to see Harry Dean Stanton. Mm-hmm. And like all civilian aircraft, it has what's called an N number. N is what is used in the United States, which is like a license plate number. You can look that up on the internet. The FAA makes this available. It's public information. That's a 1982 helicopter. This film was made in 1979. How could that be? So I don't know if they reassigned the N number or somebody mistyped something, but that's a bit of a mystery.
Yeah.
But even then, it's set in 1969. This aircraft was not produced until 10 years later. But I don't think many nerds, very few people are going to know that. Okay, so there's a lot of a Lincoln Continental executive limousine in this. There's actually two of them. And one of them is less damaged than the other. In particular, there's a 69 and a 67. The 67 is the one that we see throughout most of the rest of the film. And we know it because it has Continental in letters across the hood, the front of the hood. And the first eye is missing. And I noticed that was odd. Continental was a high-end car. If you were a limo service, I don't think that would be the case. But if you pay attention, near the end of the film, Houston drives through a barricade at one of the concert venues. And I think they shot it out of order. I think they drove through the barricade and it knocked the eye off. And then the director said, if anybody notices that the eye is missing, we've already lost them.
Enter Mike.
Enter Mike.
Excuse me, but the eye is missing.
So, I what can I say? I noticed it. There's a really sweet blue 59 Ford pickup. At one point, Rose has 69 Cadillac Fleetwood that she borrows, steals, uses. And I have to say that I really did like this bit. Again, this is very few people are going to... But she's trying to drive this thing fast. And she oversteers at the apex because it's very common for the layperson to go into a corner too hot and halfway through they stab the brakes and panic. Weight transfers to the front wheels, the ass end comes around, especially on a rear-wheel drive heavy car like a Cadillac Fleetwood. Perfectly executed amateur driver. So they had a very qualified stunt driver who did the worst thing, but that's okay, it's there. And then at one point, in one of these Cadillacs, they have a phone. Like a cell phone. Except, I don't know when cell phones in cars happen, but I'm pretty damn sure that they didn't have the same handset that Ma Bell gave you in your room to talk to your friends for Teen Beat. It was like, no, the original mobile phones in cars were a different physical construction, and this looked like someone literally just took a phone out of the hotel room and propped it on the doghouse in the car and said, there's your phone.
Well, but this was about the same time. Remember Arthur? Was it Arthur or was it Trading Places? They had a phone in the limo.
Yes, it was Trading Places. They had a phone, and I think they even had like a fax machine too.
Well, I know they had the readout, like the what they call it? ASCII? Or it was the green...
The green screen CRT.
Yeah.
And this is supposed to be 1969, so I didn't do the research on this. Sorry, listeners. It was like, wow, this is so anachronistic. But again, I think the director probably yelled at that person and said, if they notice the phone, we've lost.
All right, should we go to the numbers?
Let's go to the numbers.
Okay, so the original, before I get into that, the original home video release was separated into two parts because back then VHS could only hold 2 hours of videotape at a time. And so an alternative would have to have been edited for the movie because it was 2 hours, 15 minutes.
That was, if I recall correctly, SP for slow play.
That's right. I remember that. Oh my gosh. The film opened in New York City on Wednesday, November 7th, 1979, and it grossed $793,000 its opening weekend from 44 screens, and the second highest grossing opening weekend under 50 screens. Oh, it was the second highest grossing opening weekend under 50 screens behind Star Wars in 1977. And the film went on to gross $29.2 million in the United States and Canada. It had a budget of $8.5 million. It gets a 6.9 out of 10 on IMDb. And apparently critics have not rated it because it was not available on Rotten Tomatoes. So it is rated R. It is a 20th Century Fox film, and it is labeled drama, music, romance. Adjusted for today, the gross would have been like $122 million. So pretty successful.
Yeah, pretty successful.
Yeah. It won 5 awards and got 12 nominations. Among them was an Oscar nomination for Bette and Frederick Forrest, his only, I believe, award. He won for supporting. He won a Golden Globe for supporting. It won Best Sound and Best Film Editing, and Bette also won a Golden Globe for Best Actress that year. And the song, Amanda McBroom, who wrote the song The Rose, won for Best Original Song. I love that song. It's so sad. I just love it.
I love it. It's so sad.
It is. It's one of those, if you need to be sad, you just put on The Rose, but it's so beautiful.
That phrase makes no sense. You need to be sad.
It does to all the females out there. Right, girls?
Okay.
No, if you're already feeling sad and you just want to kind of sit in it for a minute just so that you can process it and get through it, you put on this song.
So when you get hit in the nuts, you don't sit there and try to wallow in it. You try to get to where you don't feel so bad anymore.
Somebody who has trouble expressing his emotions, instead of taking a streaking.
When he can't use his feeling words, he goes to The Rose.
I'm telling you, it works. Don't knock it till you tried it.
Right. Well, have you streaked? That might be an alternative. Just saying.
I start running through the house naked because I'm not leaving the house. I'll tell you that much. Alrighty. So let's figure out what we're watching next week. Now we need to pick for what we're going to watch next week. So stay tuned. Let's see. We are going to be talking about the film Spinal Tap.
Oh, This Is Spinal Tap. None more black.
You've got to be so excited to watch that movie.
Oh, very, very much so.
I can't wait to hear what
It's
you're...
of an era, but it's a great one. This is Spinal Tap.
We have some fun trivia for you. So we will see you next week, but never forget...
Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.
Thanks for listening to Dodge Movie Podcast with Christy and Mike Dodge of Dodge Media Productions. To find out more about this podcast and what we do, go to dodgemediaproductions.com. Subscribe, share, leave a comment, and tell us what we should watch next. Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.